my name is Jordan. I've been a type 1 diabetic for 15 years, and this is the third video in a series that I'm filming right now. So as a recap, just because maybe you didn't see all of these, the reason this video looks a little weird is because that light over there is a kickstand light. My ceiling lights are out and we don't have any light bulbs. The blue glow on me is because I'm looking at my computer to remember what questions I'm talking about, and the tripod I'm using is actually 2 Bath & Body Works candles on a stagger with my phone leaned against them. So we're going to try and do this slightly more concisely than the last 15-minute video. Okay, so I kind of touched on how every diabetic needs a little bit of a different treatment. No single person is the same, even if you're not a diabetic. I kind of talked about how your body can betray you just because it feels like it, even though you did the exact same thing yesterday and it worked perfectly. I've kind of talked a little bit about the difference between type 1 and type 2. Really, the main thing you need to know, it's nobody's fault. Nobody gives it to themselves. You cannot eat your way into diabetes. The people who have it because they are overweight or unhealthy, it's because they put stress on their body. You can't eat your way into it. Sometimes it just happens to people for no reason. And the main difference between type 1 and type 2 is that type 1 diabetics cannot produce insulin at all. They can't do it. No, none. It's gone, done. They have to take insulin that is man-made through shots or pumps or insulin pens or what have you. Type 2 diabetics do have insulin or the capability of producing it. Sometimes they also have to take man-made insulin, but sometimes they can also control it with diet, exercise, medications, what have you, and sometimes it will go away. But there is no cure for type 1 at the moment, so type 1 diabetics have to keep taking insulin or they die. Okay, so one of the questions that I was asked that most people don't ask me, like ever, and it was like mind-blowing to hear because it's kind of the reason I wanted to make these videos in the first place, and a friend of mine commented on this post that I opened up to everybody on Facebook, that I know, my friends first. The internet can get a little crazy. So I asked my friends, hey, do you have any questions about diabetes? I'm going to make this video or several, and I'm happy to talk about pretty much anything. And she asked me, how do you go about your day knowing you need an insulin pump? Now, I have an insulin pump. Not every diabetic has it, but it is kind of the standard of care now, type 1 for type 1s. And an insulin pump essentially is like when you go to the hospital and you get an IV and you're kind of on a drip of insulin. Your pancreas, if you are a non-diabetic, will give you little bits of insulin over all of your life. So your pancreas will sense if your blood sugar is trending high or trending low or whatever, and it will give you the appropriate amount of insulin, and your insulin that your body produces is effective pretty much immediately. The insulin that I take takes about 15 minutes to work. So there are a million different kinds of things to talk about here, but you have short-acting insulin that reacts within about 15 minutes and works for about 4-ish hours. And then you have long-acting insulin, which is something that you can take at one point and it will last you for about 24 hours. It'll just kind of be a slow burn, essentially. Type 1s that are on the pump do not use long-acting. We just get little tiny bursts of that short-acting insulin. We'll tell it how much we want over a certain hour, and it will give us little tiny pings every couple of minutes. So my insulin pump functions very closely to a working pancreas in a non-diabetic body, but it is not a pancreas because I have to tell it what to do. I have to tell it when to give me a certain amount of insulin. If I eat food, I have to tell it, give me this amount because this is how much I ate. And I have to test my blood sugar constantly to make sure that I took the right amount or that my pump is still working or that my pump site didn't get ripped off because I change it about every 3 days. But it's essentially, it's a little tiny tube. It's little. It's very little. It's very flexible. There's no needle in it. When I insert it, there's a needle that goes in with the tube, and then I pull the needle out, so it's just a little tiny flexible tube in there. And that stays under my skin for roughly 3 days, and then I'll change my pump out because you don't want to build scar tissue and all that good stuff. And also the insulin that you keep in your pump is not going to be good for much longer than 3 days. So I'm about to switch pumps. I may actually do a video kind of showing you my new pump because it's really cool. I'm super excited about it. But my pump is my pancreas. And it is very expensive. It's a very expensive piece of medical equipment. And I have to I have to change it out, my site, every 3 days. And the thing about that is the site changes are also expensive. So I've got this mechanical pancreas that costs a couple $1,000s, that insurance usually will pay a good chunk of, but not always. They did for me, fortunately. And then you have to buy supplies constantly. I mean, you just have to keep buying them, obviously. You cannot leave them in for more than a couple days or your body rejects it, and it's bad news. So typically with my insulin pump, for example, I ended up paying close to $1,000 for it out of pocket. It's expensive, but now they build them so they're virtually indestructible. So that's good, because the one that I used to have just broke all the time. We stopped counting after 20, and I've only had diabetes for 15 years, 14 of which I've been on the pump. So we've come a long way from when I was first diagnosed. The pumps that we have now are crazy awesome. They almost have one that will detect your blood sugar and give you insulin based on that all by itself, which is so cool. And the only reason they're not calling it a cure is because they're not reversing diabetes. Like, you still have to treat it, but it does it itself. And as far as I'm concerned, that's close enough. So I'm like, you keep working on that. Get me a pump that will do all the work for me, because right now I have to be my own pancreas. It's not fun. In any case, I go about my day knowing I need a pump, and most of the time I'm just like, all right, I got diabetes. Let's deal with it. Let's do it. It's fine. Even the days when it doesn't cooperate with me, my life philosophy is, okay, it's happening, and if you can change it, great. Go change it. Don't complain about it. And if you can't change it, yeah, sure, complain about it a little bit. You can feel bad for yourself. But don't do it too much, because it's going to make you miserable and it's going to make everyone around you miserable. And if you can't change it, then what's the point in complaining about it? That's just a life philosophy that I've kind of come to over the years. But listen, I know I have diabetes. At this point, I just deal with it. And yes, there are some days where I will literally be in tears at the end of the day, just like, why is this so hard? Because it is. It's so hard. But I know I have it. And if I don't take care of it, it's just going to be way worse. So I just try to do the best I can. So I go about my day knowing I need a pump that way. Now, there are other people who see that I have a pump and they're like, oh, that girl's diabetic. And they don't understand diabetes. So they're like, oh, she must have eaten her way into it. Or, oh, it must be her fault. There are some people who see it and they're just like, ugh. There are some people who hear me say, hey, I gotta stop and like change my pump out or change the battery or get some new insulin. And they're just like, ugh, this is so inconvenient. And I'm like, really? Really? Is it inconvenient? Is my diabetes inconvenient for you? Because, oh my God, if I don't take care of it, I die. If you don't count your carbs and you're not a diabetic, your body does it for you. If I don't do it, I end up in a hospital and or dead. Not cool. So there are some days where it's really easy to deal with, and there are other days where it's not. And I think having that in the back of my head, just knowing that it's something that's constantly there are certain parts of it that now are habit and they're easy for me to do, and I just don't even think about it. So when people ask me, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll show you how I test my blood sugar. Yeah, sure, I'll show you how I change my pump out. Yeah, sure, I'll give you a demo of what the pump does. Yeah, here, smell insulin. It smells like Band-Aids. It does, and it's really weird. So anytime I smell Band-Aids, I'm like, oh my God, is my pump broken? Did something happen? Most of the time when I smell Band-Aids, it's because someone opened a Band-Aid. But it's like a really strong smell. So like, there are certain things like needles that freak people out, and they're like, oh my God, I could never do that. I could never have diabetes because I'm deathly afraid of needles. I'm like, you think I liked them in the beginning? No way. Like, you couldn't get near me with anything mildly pointy. But when they tell you in the hospital, you can either take your shots or you can die, nobody's gonna say, okay, I'll die. Nobody. I promise you. 12-year-old me, not into it. But, you know, you either do it or die. So that's how I live with it. I think to myself when it gets really bad, all right, it's bad. You let yourself be sad about it. Give yourself some time to process it, because denying your emotions is stupid and I don't recommend doing that. It'll make you miserable. But you can't let it win. Because if you just keep doing that, it's just going to be so much harder. So the reason I'm making these videos, the reason I'm trying to be super open and answer all these questions is because I want other people to understand what it's like to have diabetes, because diabetics are so stigmatized and we're so afraid to tell people, hey, I need a break. Hey, I need some help. Hey, this is really sucks for me. I'm really sad about it. Because we don't want pity. Most of us don't want pity. We just want your understanding. We want compassion. We want people to understand that we're not lying, that we really are sick, and sometimes it's just too much. I mean, any kind of autoimmune disease, any kind of sickness, anything can be that hard. So I just want people to understand that when we ask for help, it is so, so damaging and so demoralizing and just so awful for people to look at us and be like, yeah, well, you did it to yourself. Because we didn't. I mean, you don't understand. I can't make you understand. I can't make you believe me. But again, that's why I'm trying to answer these questions and put it out there that it's not as bad as it seems, but yes, it is bad and it's hard. And we don't usually try to make it seem like it's hard, but we are sick. I mean, we are. That's the only thing I can say about it, is we are sick. And some days it's not bad, and some days it's terrible. Like, if you walk out on the street, just to kind of put this in perspective, you can look at a lot of people, and you don't know. Some of them could have cancer. Some of them could have terminal cancer. And then you wouldn't even know that. But then you can look at other people who are, you know, they have all the hair loss. They look really frail. They're very weak. They're very pale. And you'll talk to them and they'll be like, yeah, I have cancer. It's not a big deal. And you're like, what? Yes, it is. You look sick. But you don't know. You don't know what's going on in their mind. So you don't know if someone's sick or not unless you're them. And all you can do is believe them. Or not. All you can do is try to understand what they're going through. And that's all we're asking for. Just kind of understand what we're going through. So if you have any questions, any comments, any whatever feedback, aside from how bad the lighting is in this video and how weird the framing is, like I said, it's on my iPhone. My camera is a little bit out of commission right now. But if you have any questions or comments or anything, leave a comment down here on YouTube for me, or you can find me on Facebook or maybe Twitter. I don't usually respond to people on Twitter that I don't know, but I'll put those links down here. So anything that you got, send it to me and I will try to answer it. Bye, guys.